So today we're looking at some Korean martial arts. I bet you couldn't figure out what the first clue was on that one. So guys, welcome back to Dane Hard Martial Arts on YouTube. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. We're going to take a look at the 2024 revised standards for promotion from white belt to gold belt level that we use in my system, Western Masters Martial Arts. We use the term hyung with an E, not to be confused with hyung, H-Y-U-N-G, which is Korean for brother. We're talking about hyung, the form and or pattern, similar to the Japanese term kata. You'll hear other terms thrown around for this like pomse, pom-e, tul, and hyung. Older Taekwondo systems tend to use the term hyung to describe their form patterns. Our first one is Chon-ji. Chon-ji literally interprets as heaven and earth. It is interpreted as the creation of the world at the beginning of human history. Therefore, it is the initial pattern plan for white belt advancement to gold belt level. If you can get something close to that definition on your testing requirements, then you've met the standard for the gold belt level for promotion to that. Throughout this videotape, we're going to be looking at the various new standards for 2024, and we're going to be utilizing kickboxing, combative jiu-jitsu, aikijujitsu, a lot of traditional Taekwondo, all kind of rolled into what we call Western Masters Martial Arts. Guys, welcome back to Dane Hard Martial Arts on YouTube. Let's take a look at Chon-ji pattern. So Chon-ji kata performed. First movement is to the left with a low block and punch. Throughout the pattern, we go left, then right. We do quarter turn and half turn. The entire pattern is made up of simple blocks and punches, with the last four movements being 2 punches to the front and 2 punches to the rear. At the end of the pattern, we will step back into goman in order to show respect. The key-ops, or yells, are on the first movement, on the 8th movement, and on the last punch. The applications on the low block can be against a wrist grab, they can be against a snap kick, against a side kick, and the yapchagi, which is a side block, can also be used to block against grabs and or punches. When we wear the belt, we want to take the ends and put them together. That will allow us to find the center point of the belt more easily, as I'm doing here. The ends going together, and then the belt will be folded in half. I place the center point around my belly button, or my tanden, my center. I'm going to wrap it around, bringing both ends in front. And I want to start with the right side going under, and then the left side pulls under both, which begins the beginning of the knot. Dressing my uniform, pulling the knot tightly, and then making a square knot out of the belt. This is our Junbi position, which is the position of attention at the beginning of an exercise. The same name, goman, is the same position at the end of an exercise, and then typically after goman you will hear the term sho, which means to relax. In the previous stance, Jukam Sogi, about 50-50 is the displacement on the weight for that horse riding stance. This position is called a front stance. And on the front stance position, we're about 70% of the weight on the front leg, 30% on the rear leg. Some schools teach 60-40, but definitively the majority of your weight is going to be supported by your front leg on a front stance. In this position, Dwi Gibi Sogi, which is back stance, about 70% of the weight is now shifted to the rear leg and about 30% of the weight is on the front leg. Both legs are somewhat loaded so that you have a spring effect in this position, and a back stance is sometimes referred to as a Changul stance and or a fighting stance. This is a very classic posture. At the gold belt level, we will introduce the fourth and final stance, which is a cat stance, or in Korean, a tiger stance. Now we're going to do it more slowly. So when you watch this position, I'm going to come to my Junbi position first. My right hand is going to come up by my left ear, palm facing the ear, and I roll the hammer strike out in a low block, centering my hand on my chest, feet come together, and then I throw the punch. I shift my balance point, turning durya dur, same type of low block, and same center punch. Turning durya dur, same low block, and then the command goman and sho would occur at the end. Now we're moving into what is called yap maki. This is the sidearm block, and this is done from a back stance. So you have one front stance basic and one back stance basic. If we look at yap maki done slowly, I'm going to again come to the Junbi position. I'm going to step out right side lead, scooping under and executing a sidearm block. When I do this, I'm scooping and knocking the punch out of the way or the strike. Again, as I move forward, my commands for turning are durya, dur, and then goman, sho. In this section, we talk about sankai, which are really the three powers. The three powers in ancient Chinese theory were heaven, earth, and man. Chon-ji, its interpretation, heaven and earth, is a reference to the connection of these three powers. We can see it if we look at Muhammad Ali in his movement. His feet are connected, his hips are solid, and the extension on his hands is frankly amazing. We call this grounding, hips, and extension, part of the three powers of earth, man, and heaven. Here we are in a classical horse stance position, which many people don't really understand the value of. But when we set into a wider position, we're forced to ground our position, making a solid connection. We rotate our hips, which helps with extension and with torquing the punch. The punch itself extends from the hips and connects through the hips to the floor. If we look at a back fist, we see the same thing, where the hips and the legs connect to the floor, and that slight counter torque allows for a more powerful punch. If we look here at striking the bag, you'll see the extension through the hips as I connect through to the floor. On jabs, it's really the same principle. So this ancient Chinese principle of sankai, or heaven, earth, man, can really be seen in this idea of connection or base, hips or torque, and extension or punch. Let's take a look at some other punching strikes and see how these apply.
On elbow strikes, I would strongly recommend folks go back to the previous lesson where we detail multiple types of elbow strikes, where we look at the stance and we look at the application. That would be on lessons 10 and 11, elbow strikes and or knee strikes. When we start looking at foot strikes, understanding the surface of the foot that you strike with, the heel or the toes at the tarsal head, or if you're wearing a combat boot versus a flip-flop, all of those things are to take into consideration before you launch a foot strike. The first strike that we like to look at is your snap kick, here called aikijujitsu. I like to try to keep my hands held high and snap from the knee. This is a basic snap kick that you'll often see on tests. We also do snap kicks from a front stance position, as done here. This is useful for doing board breaking and those sorts of things at higher levels. Notice again, my hands aren't dropping, I'm not jerking very much, and the snap is fairly smooth. Here you see me doing back leg snap kicks. I hold my hands in a Muay Thai position, which is really hands held high. It allows me to be able to connect with any lead hands that they may bring up to try to block the attacking position. In Aikido, we refer to that as ateme. When I strike, they have to force a block. When they force a block, that isolates their hand for 1 millisecond or so, which would allow me then to be able to grab and or make contact. In martial arts, we talk about point of contact becoming point of control. And that's exceptionally important if you're trying to bridge the gap between a percussion martial art and a joint locking martial art like Aikido. Here I'm working a side kick. Again, you can see the three powers, the sankai, coming into play. I'm grounded, my hips are extending, I'm rotating through the hips, grounding to the floor with extension. That's that transfer of power driving through the heel. Again, the kicks don't have to be high. I've lost my ability to do high kicks for the most part. Most of my kicks are now at belt level. But again, driving the heel, thinking about foot position, thinking about which part of the weapon you're striking with, and of course, Bruce Lee's famous principle, weapon first, applies here. This is a back leg side kick with the same principle. Again, driving through. As long as you keep your hands relatively up close to your face on kicks, that's perfectly acceptable. When I drop out of the technique, both of my hands draw down. That's kind of a bad habit that I've developed, but it's okay because I'm extremely ready to throw a secondary side kick immediately after throwing the first side kick. Often I'll do that in order to bait or draw the person in for an attack. This is yet another type of side kick that would be a basic skill at white belt level. This is called a skipping side kick. This allows you to travel and you can actually reach and get some distance with this skill set. Again, connection, move forward, transfer, rotate hips, extension, and power. The sankai, the three principles. In this section, we take a look at what I call the box method for blocking. Our hands are held high, and this is really much more of a lesson from kickboxing than it would be from a Taekwondo skill set. The leg raises are trapping for kicks, trying to clamshell a strike where you actually catch it. I'm not reaching out with my hands so much as I am thinking about kickboxing principles and blocking with both my legs and my arms. In Western Masters, we utilize both dynamic techniques, which means movement, and static techniques, like we're doing here, where we're not moving so much around the ring. These are basic kickboxing drills, again, blending some of my kickboxing experience with our Taekwondo system in order to have a more effective fighting system. Let's take a look at these done slowly. Jab to a jab cross. Notice the pivot. Notice the shoulder rolling up to cover the J point. Now we add in a jab cross with a ridge hand strike, which is the opposite of a shuto strike. Snap kick lead leg, cross punch, jab, snap kick lead leg, cross punch. Now we're going to change up with a back fist, then a low side kick to the knee, followed by a reverse punch. At your gold belt level, you'll be doing these with a partner as he's striking at you so that you begin to understand how to put all the pieces of this puzzle together, and it'll make more sense at that point. Here we're blending elbows. This next is called a bolo punch. Elbow to elbow strike straight up. Now follow with elbow to elbow, bolo, and then clear out with a jab. So now we're up to our fitness requirement on the white belt examination. Fitness is not fitness pizza into your mouth. Fitness is having enough physical fitness to be able to mount an attack or a defense for about 1 minute. We will start with basic movement drills. I like to include this clock method drill where you're shuffling back and forth, getting your feet out of cement, elbows are in, hands are held at least the jaw level, and you're switching positions back and forth, moving to 12 o'clock, to 6 o'clock, to 3 o'clock, and to 9 o'clock. Again, an homage to my kickboxing background, but something that will make your fighting much more effective and more functional. Once we're done this, we then do 10 side straddle hops, which is basically just a nod to my service in the military. Once we've done our side straddle hops, next is a deep squat. And on the squat, we want our knees to go down and break that 90-degree plane. The deeper, the better. Our feet want to be flat on the floor. And again, the magic number that we're looking for is that you can do 10 of these. On the 10th one, you're going to go down and you're going to do about a 5-second hold in that position before you roll out and prepare to do sit-ups. Here's the hold. And then simply tip back and you're in a sit-up position. We prefer cruncher style sit-ups to regular sit-ups. The abdominal muscles, the rectus abdominis, has 8 segmented muscles. What we're doing with cruncher style sit-ups is really isolating the upper 4 segments, which helps to guard the solar plexus. If you've ever been hit in the breadbasket, you'll understand why this is a really important muscle group to try to toughen up, tone up, and develop some strength with. After that, we move forward to these, which are thrusts or pelvic thrusts. We're trying to do both concentric and eccentric exercise, so we're balancing both sides of the body. This is going to work the glute muscles as well as the spinal erector muscles. Here, we're going to do leg raises, which helps to hit the lower part of the back as well as the psoas muscle in the lumbosacral region, trying to keep the feet together and keep your legs as straight as possible. Once you're done 10 of these, again, there's that magic number, we're going to roll over into a push-up position, and the push-ups that we do are different than the way we used to do them. These are from the United States Army. It's the current push-up that's being done. You go from a non-contact position to where you push up, and when you do that, it forces you to plank out on each push-up. Our goal, again, here is to do 10 of these in a row. Push up and plank, push up and plank. And once you get done 10, then that finishes up the fitness requirements at the white belt level. In this section, we're talking about terminology. So, 감사합니다. It's great to have you guys with me. Terminology, first is the counting numbers. The Korean counting numbers are hana, hol, set, net, daset, ilga, yudal, eha, yo. So be able to say those on your white belt examination. Hana, hol, set, net, daset, ilga, yudal, eha, yo. It's all 10. And then next is the term dojang. Understand the difference between dojo and dojang. Dojang is a Korean term for school or gym. Dojo is a Japanese term. You also have Taekwondo, the way of the hand and fist. So that's something you should be able to tell me what the meaning of Taekwondo is. Sabum and sabum-nim, two different levels of teacher. Be able to tell me the differentiation between those two things. The next turn is the command for turning, which is dorya-dur. You'll hear an inflection, dorya-dur, and then you turn on that when you're doing exercises. Just like at the beginning of the exercise, we will call junbi. And at the end of an exercise, we will say goman, which is the same thing as junbi. You go back to this position of attention, and then we will say sho, which means to relax. So the next term then is this idea of charyo and then kunji. Charyo means to stand at attention, and kunji means respect. So these are the white belt terms that would be required that you know in order to successfully pass your examination to gold belt. In this next section, we're going to talk about self-defense. At higher belt levels, we will teach you numerous self-defense skill sets and movements. Here we talk about principles. The first principle, awareness. In this scenario, Bruce actually grabs me before I'm aware of the attack. His grab would be the point of control. I'm using my neck and my shoulder to function as a hammer and anvil, turning my body sideways, which is called blading. I occupy the space with a side kick, which then allows me to escape. So situational awareness, contact to control, hammer anvil theory, blading, occupy space, and escape. Let's talk about etiquette now. In this section, we're talking about etiquette. There's a Japanese phrase called aikijujitsu, and it interprets as one thing shows everything. And etiquette in traditional martial arts is an extremely important aspect of the traditional or classical martial arts that's often overlooked. So some rules of etiquette. Number one, your personal hygiene. Make sure that your uniform is clean, make sure that you are clean, that you're shaved. If you don't have a beard, that you've washed your hair. More importantly, your fingernails are trimmed, those sorts of things. Can't tell you how many times I've grappled with someone when you get off of the mat, you get scrapes and cuts and nicks from their fingernails being too long. I wrestled in high school all 4 years, and I can remember one year, one of the wrestlers had impetigo and he didn't really tell anybody else. And of course, within a week or so, everybody on the team had a staph infection on their skin from this impetigo, which was highly infectious, and the coach had to basically cancel one of our wrestling matches, and they had to sanitize the mats until everybody got better. So personal hygiene, extremely important. Your uniform's appearance, have your belt worn properly. Take the time to press and starch your uniform so that it looks appropriate. The more professional you look, the more professional your bearing is going to be. And again, getting back to that ichijigabanji, one thing can truly show everything in martial arts. Next is be on time. If you're constantly late for classes, always showing up 5 to 10 minutes late for a tournament or for a seminar or some other event, this idea of being on time and being prompt really shows respect to the hosts and to the dojo and to your teachers. Next is bowing. Make sure that you bow at the appropriate times during class. Typically that will be called for by the instructor, so make sure that you do that. In addition to that, I take the extra steps of making sure that I bow when I go into the dojo and when I leave the dojo. I even do it at tournament sites. When I go into a tournament, I'll bow. When I leave that tournament site, I also bow. Often I'll bow before I go into a competition ring and also leave the competition ring.
Making sure you accept decisions as lessons. You never really lose a match. You win the match and or you learn from the match. You never lose. If you're gonna argue with a judge, don't do that. Don't even bother with it, because one thing, again, shows everything. Ichi-jigabanji. If you're arguing about this or that and arguing over a point, what really is the value of a point? The point of martial arts is that we set an example for others who are watching us. And again, ichi-jigabanji. One thing shows everything. If you didn't get the right call or you don't feel it was the right call, accept it, bow, be respectful, and move on. Next is represent. You're representing the people who came before you. I represent Grandmaster Jun Ri, the father of Taekwondo in the United States. I represent Hanshi Kevin Block. I represent Soke Gozo Shioda. I represent Shihan Dana Abbott. I represent his teacher, Tetsundo Tanabe. So we represent a lot of folks, but most importantly, you represent yourself. So make sure that your uniform's clean, that you're on time, that you're properly respectful, and that you accept the decisions of others, and that you're not argumentative. Next, titles. Use the titles. When we talk about etiquette in martial arts, if someone is a master or grandmaster or even supreme grandmaster, use those titles. If they're a sabum, a teacher, or sabum nim, a senior teacher, use those titles. If it's a Japanese style and it's sensei or shihan or hanshi, shihan dai or enshi, soke, all these different titles. If someone has an honorific that's awarded, make sure that you use that title. I was a colonel in the United States Army, and so my soldiers referred to me as sir and or colonel and nothing else. That's what is appropriate. That's ichi-jigabanji. One thing shows everything about your etiquette, your uniform, your cleanliness, your respect, how you represent, and how you act.